Do you ever feel like you're running on empty, trying to keep up with family, work, and still find moments to breathe? Today, Faith Freed joins us to share how reconnecting with your sense of wonder and soul can fill your tank in surprising ways. You'll learn how small shifts in mindset and daily moments can help you feel more alive and grounded right where you are. So stay tuned. Welcome to Fulfillment Therapy. I'm Kendra Nielsen, wife, mom, and licensed therapist. Do you ever feel like you're doing everything right, but you're still exhausted and empty? Did you think life, marriage, and parenting would be simpler and more rewarding? Sometimes you just want to crawl back into bed and lose yourself in screen time and chocolate, rather than face that personal or family stress. You are not alone. This podcast helps you break free of the rat race and build a richer, more meaningful life, flourishing incrementally and realistically, improving your mental health and wellness, and living with deeper purpose beyond the mundane, no matter where you are in life's journey. Welcome back to Fulfillment Therapy. Today we have a special guest here with us, Faith Freed. She's a licensed psychotherapist with over 15 years of experience helping people find clarity, peace, and purpose. Based in Santa Barbara and working virtually across the country, she blends clinical expertise with real-life wisdom to help others heal and live more soulfully. Before becoming a therapist, Faith was a successful advertising writer, and her unique path from ad agencies to psychotherapy has shaped her grounded, relatable approach to personal growth. She's also the author of the upcoming book, DIY Spirituality, a witty and heartfelt guide for modern seekers who want more meaning without the rules. So super excited to have you on the show today. Thanks for coming, Faith.
Thanks, Kendra. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are. I know you're going to go into your story a little bit, but a little bit about your path that led you here.
Yeah, sure. So I started out as a writer, I guess you would say. I was a copywriter in advertising, and that was an interesting career right out of grad school with a lot of creativity and very colorful personalities. And I realized during that job, too, that I loved psychology because I ended up being the cubicle therapist to a lot of my coworkers. And they would seek relationship advice and things like that. And it ended up being more fun for me than the writing, I think, because in that field, it was very much be funny or I'll kill you. You know what I mean? It was like the gun to your head to come up with funny, clever lines. And anyway, that it was very anxiety producing. And when I had children, I realized that probably wasn't an environment that I wanted to go back into just because I didn't want that type of anxiety to permeate and bleed out at home. So I know that kids are little sponges and absorb everything. So then I turned towards psychology and really wanted to ground myself in a more peaceful mindset and lifestyle. So I went back to school for psychotherapy, and I went to a transpersonal school that really, in some wonderful way, it took from a lot of wisdom traditions and pulled from philosophy and spirituality and psychology, and I became super intrigued with where all of those overlap. And I actually realized that I was a spiritual eclectic myself, and it was nice to hear that sort of category existed, but it also was striking to me that it really is something underplayed and little talked about. So then I started thinking people like me could really use something to help them in their journey. And that's where kind of the idea for a DIY approach and book was born.
So that spiritual eclectic, I haven't heard that term before, but I'm curious about that. Can you tell us a little bit more about what that means for you and how that led to the book?
Sure. I think I was always a questioner growing up. My parents had differing beliefs. I kind of bounced around, but for the most part, when I was young, he was an atheist because he was just very sciencey and logical. And then my mother was a Christian and would take us to church, and we sang in the choir, and it was really lovely. And the music was a big connector for me. But I still had the freedom, because they were so starkly different, to ask my own questions. And that is what I did. So I guess I was a natural born speaker in a household where I had all the freedom I wanted. And two opposites were demonstrated or modeled for me. I respected and loved both my parents, and it just led me to be very open-minded on the topic. I also had a lot of Jewish friends and friends of other faiths, and I loved to explore what they were doing and what they believed. And I decided to make what rings true to me be the measure of what I keep in my spiritual soup. And I think that's what a spiritual eclectic does. I think it's taking from different traditions and religions, and even just creating things of your own that resonate and make you feel that sense of connection with your source, however you conceive that, and then leaning into that buffet of things that you go to, and that can change over time as well. Whether it is a sacred text or something borrowed from the East, like meditation or yoga or scripture, Bible study, whatever it is that lights people up, I think is the important thing isn't how you connect, but that you do connect.
Yeah. I appreciate you talking about that, because I feel like it's such a taboo thing, especially in psychotherapy. We're so afraid to talk about this, and yet when you connect to what their values are, often they will talk about God or a higher power, or whatever that might be. And once you show in therapy that's a safe space to talk about those things, that ends up being often, at least for my clients, some of the most meaningful things they report back as helping them in that journey. So I'm really grateful that you do it. And also, I think there's a lot of shame mixed in with some of these things. It's interesting that you have that perspective, having one parent that was an atheist and then one Christian, but that also taught you to appreciate all sorts of things, turn inward a little bit, like what resonates, what feels good. You became a seeker of truth, or the things that really resonated within you. I love that. And sometimes we're so afraid to pick from that buffet that you're talking about of these other things that can really bring us more peace. For example, my church, they talk about meditation, but not as much as sometimes I would like. So that doesn't completely distress me. I just think, oh, this is something that I would like to adopt a little bit more and explore a little bit more, like what you're saying. But tell me a little bit more about that, if you wouldn't mind. Some people's resistance to maybe talking about spirituality.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. And like you, I'm a therapist. So it's not something I lead within the therapy room, but I do ask on my intake form, do you practice any spirituality? You have to know that, because you can't underestimate how important this is. And so I don't ever want anyone to feel like we have to talk about that. Spiritual guidance is a different thing. That's what people are coming in for, right, to talk about their faith. But I 100% agree with you, Kendra, that I think that when you do go there, and that will be client driven, because again, there's been spiritual wounding and people's experience may have been traumatizing in some way. We don't know. But when it does come up, I agree with you. It tends to be one of the tools that our clients go to feel relief from their mental stress. And I think that is a great tool to leverage. I wish more people did that. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you reiterated that, because there are some wounds or something, whether you're a therapist or not, have some agenda of how it should be, but making sure it's client-led, using it as a tool, and especially asking in that intake. If for those that are not familiar with the whole process of it, you gather information and then explore their goals, their treatment plan, what they want to do. And in that, you can ask that question, is this something you'd like to address? Or just getting their feedback on if that's something that is important for them to explore or not. And if they are, then using those tools. So you're talking about spirituality for you. It has been like gathering from, I love your food references here, but leaning into that buffet of truth and gathering these different things. Can you talk a little bit about what things have been meaningful to you?
Oh, yes, I can. I think what I have noticed, this is an interesting segue because it's so true, is that nature tends to be the common denominator among clients, whether they are practicing any kind of faith or spiritual system. There's something about nature that I think is our best portal to the divine. Maybe it's just that magic and the mystery and the awe-inspiring nature of it, or the complexity of just one tomato or a little bug that is so beyond what we can conceive of, that makes you believe in something beyond ourselves. But I think the same is true for me. I've been chasing waterfalls. I know TLC says not to, not old 80s song, but I've recently been to Iceland and saw the Golden Circle, which has about 7 waterfalls that were just mind-blowingly gorgeous. And I've also been to Yosemite recently. I don't know if you've been, Kendra.
Yeah, beautiful.
Okay, so all those waterfalls are amazing. Vernal Falls and Bridal Veil. And I think there's something about a waterfall that brings me into the present moment, and you're looking at the water on its journey from one sort of form and place to another. And even though it has that great fall, which is where all the drama happens, that's really the money note, if you will. That's like the place that, your eye goes, thinking about how that fall is like our struggle in the human life. And even though it's dramatic and it feels life altering in the moment, when the water lands, it just reintegrates on a different plane and everything is well again. So I think that sort of shape shifting is beautiful. It's a beautiful metaphor for life. So I guess that would be one of them. The other I talk about a lot is 11:11. I like the numbers lining up because it gives me 1 minute in the day. And if I'm up for 11:11 p.m., that's 2. But it's a quick visual reminder where I connect with my source and myself and hit all the bases of my spiritual soup, even in 60 seconds. And so then I remember to be grounded and grateful and lit up. And so those are 2 of my favorites. But I will say, I also feel like there's something about DIY spirituality that's different in the sense that there's no recipe. Back to the food references. There's no one recipe for anyone's DIY, and it could change day to day. So some of the prescribed ways to practice spirituality don't resonate with people who aren't the kind of people who do the same routine exactly the same every day. I like the idea that you can have DIY spirituality without needing to define it for anyone else or defend it. And really, sometimes these things that are so sacred to us are better left unsaid.
I hadn't thought about it in that way before I wrote that down, but it says you don't need to define or defend it, and that can shift day to day. And what I like about that is that your book talks about that freedom aspect of it, but it is more, correct me if I'm wrong here, more mindfulness based, more tuning within, more like maybe slowing down and getting better about listening to yourself, your wants, your needs, your hopes, whatever that is, but tuning into the body a lot more. Is that an aspect that you talk about?
Yes, I agree with you 100%. Because I think that we know on a deep level what resonates with our inner truth. Mm-hmm. And that is, I think, how you create your spiritual playlist with the DIY approach. And that can be taken from whatever it is that you were raised with or whatever appeals to you. But it's like I mentioned in church, when I would hear the choir sing or sing with the choir, or there was a hymn, it would just light up my spirit, and every cell in my body felt like a light bubbling up from within. So I know that is something that matters to me. But it is an inner check. It's, okay, is this the thing that lights me up? And if not, maybe it's okay to dispense with that and move on and collect other things that ring true to you. So I think it is, you said paying attention to the body, and it is. It's not overthinking it. Where is the chord hit within you of resonance that is saying, yes, my spirit is alive, and this is soothing to my soul. And then those are the things I think that you want to include in your spiritual practice.
I really like that wording too. What's soothing to my soul? And I think about even my own spiritual journey. Like I go, and I know not everyone does, but I go to an organized church denomination. And for a while, I was very hung up on what it needed to look like, what other people were doing. And as I've gotten older, I've started to shift that, like what you're saying, what's soothing to my soul? And that can look so different than everyone around you, even though you're potentially practicing the same faith. And again, this is for organized religion, but it can be anything. It can be like in a yoga class. It can be at a retreat, whatever you're doing. And not getting so hung up on how other people are doing it, but what soothes your own soul? What does that look like? You even mentioned that, like, you don't need to define and defend it to other people, but explore what that means for you, and more of this, again, going back to that mindfulness, that connection to self. Really appreciate you sharing that. This can be very triggering to people, I think, because of wounds from the past, for sure. But can you speak to that maybe a little bit more? Like how this can also be an activating thing to talk about for people.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Like, just that fact alone is a little bizarre. Because if you're thinking about life and the categories that we want to hit when we're thinking about a full and balanced life, maybe it's finances and relationships, career, fitness, health, and then somewhere in that, I would think you'd have spirituality or religion, faith, belief system, whatever it is. So it's a necessary, really foundational part of our life. And yet it's a contentious thing at times. I think because maybe people can't hold space for other people to do their own thing or believe their own way. And as soon as you get into something rigid where it's my way or the highway, so to speak, then it's very touchy.
Yeah.
And everybody doesn't have the luxury that I had of growing up in a household where I was allowed to have my own perspective on things.
Mm-hmm.
So that can be very scary. And that's why we have to tread lightly. I use my own term for the divine, infinite source, just again to open up to the idea that this source that we conceive of, it doesn't care what it's called as long as you call it. Mm-hmm. That's how I think about it. I think that you're right. We do need to be mindful that this is a topic that's difficult for a lot of people to engage with. And why that is, I think we know why. But to be able to bring spirituality into a conversation in a way that is lighthearted and well-intentioned without any sort of agenda is what I am wanting to do.
Can you walk us through what that might look like in a session so people can conceptualize what that might be?
The session thing, it was a spiritual guidance session. That would be the time to engage with this in that sort of setting. And we talked about how in therapy we don't go there unless it's really relevant. But in a spiritual guidance session, what it might look like is typically the focus on someone's relationship with their creator. And so that's where we hold space for that to be explored. And that being the focus, I think it's the job of the guide to make sure that we stay on point and on track with that as the subject we're focused on, and usually there's some sharing that happens and some silence that happens and maybe some gentle feedback from the guide. So it looks like a therapy session, but the focus is on spirituality. It is something that I'm credentialed in, and it's a very sacred time to share with someone. That relationship with the divine, I think, is sacred and intimate and to be held with a lot of reverence.
That's often what I see. I try to let it go organically where it needs to be very client-led in those sessions, and I'm often amazed where it takes itself. But there is this level of reverence for what comes out of those sessions, and it's just so beautiful because, again, the client kind of directs where some of that goes. Obviously, therapist-led to keep that in a space that's beneficial for them. But I love that you talked about the reverence part and how it can be very intimate, very sacred. So maybe this is in session, maybe this is otherwise, but what about for listeners that might be wondering, okay, I want to explore more of this divine source, connect more to my creator, whatever words you call it, but I'm not really sure how to. Before, maybe I had a parent that was so extreme, or maybe I had a parent that really shamed anything spiritual. And so they're on one side of that perhaps, and they want to move forward. What would you recommend for them if they're seeking to reconnect to that?
I think the first thing is to give yourself permission. At some level, it's nobody else's business. You mentioned something earlier about really paying attention to what is going on for you internally in terms of your inner truth and your own experience. And that's something that is between you and your source. So if you feel those inklings that you're inclined to be spiritual in some way, then the first thing is pay some attention to that. And you can just contemplate and you can journal, but I think that part of you does need your attention. The soul loves our attention. And so how to do it, that's basically why I wrote the book. And I use a system in there that is a gentle invitation for people to open up to that. Yeah, it uses the symbol of a divine disco ball, actually, to bring some lighthearted fun and celebration to the idea of the spiritual life. And with that system, there are 4 sort of areas that you can consider. I think this framework helps you to think about it, or at least to start thinking about it. And those basic categories are just a physical and non-physical expression of yourself and your source. So the body, mind, the soul and the spirit, and then infinite source, or whatever you want to call that, the divine, and then the physical expression of that being nature.
Yeah, definitely. There's several things that you said just now and even previously that I wanted to touch on a little bit. Like sometimes when you talk about giving yourself permission, what comes to mind is maybe this need to explore people pleasing. I know that comes up with a lot of my clients, and it's really hard to give yourself permission when you're so hyper focused on the needs of others instead of your own. And that can be tied to all sorts of cultures, your family culture, your national culture. We have several of those, right? And sometimes, for example, traditional faith or traditional religion is not as popular, or sometimes, even Eastern spiritual beliefs or spirituality was not as popular. And it can feel taboo to explore different areas sometimes. Thanks for joining us for this inspiring start to our conversation with Faith Freed. If today's episode sparks something within you, visit fulfillmenttherapy.org to explore our upcoming group coaching and self-growth courses, or sign up for our weekly emails packed with encouragement and tools for fulfillment. You can also reach out to hello@fulfillmenttherapy.org if there's a topic or even questions under a topic, say 10 to 15 questions. You can email us. We'll look those over and we may use that for podcast episodes. This could be either video for a free coaching call that we'd potentially use for an episode, or it can simply be the questions. So whatever you would like, if you'd like that extra help and support, just reach out to us there. We'll see you back here shortly for part 2. Hey friends, if you enjoyed this episode, a quick 30-second share can help someone else find support and help this podcast grow. Leaving a review on Apple Podcasts boosts visibility and keeps the show alive. Your simple acts make a big difference. I'll see you back here each week for more life-changing episodes.